This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
It happens all the time on this show. We'll talk about something oftentimes in passing, maybe for 30 seconds. And then an audience member will follow up and say, hey, that thing you were talking about, it's actually a bigger thing and we should talk about it more. And this episode is exactly that. We had some fun during Positive Reflections, the first episode this week, a couple of episodes ago with the Nathan Fillion Civilian Pavilion. And I told you I was going to try to find many more ways to discuss it just because it's so fun to say this new installation in somewhat of an iconic or legendary location in our home city of Edmonton. And don't worry, if you're listening to this from Victoria or Hamilton or Madagascar, there's going to be something of interest today. This is not just a conversation about Edmonton. We're talking today about placemaking and city building. And we had a couple of pretty brilliant people, quite frankly, reach out to us and say, hey, that Nathan Fillion Civilian Pavilion is actually part of a bigger thing, and actually we're part of making it happen, and we'd love to talk to your engaged audience about it. And I said, perfect. And so that's where we're going today with three movers and shakers, three placemakers, three city builders. And we're looking forward to getting into what makes great communities, where design is going, what's different now from 50 or even 10 years ago when we're planning out our communities and places where people recreate, where people gather. This episode of Real Talk is happening with the support of Alberta's top real estate school, and that's Relo. You can find them online at relo.ca. That's R-E-L-O. If you're sick of working for somebody else, if you're sick of having your income capped, if you're sick of showing up every single day to that same old cubicle, you're going to want to check out Relo. More and more people are getting into real estate because they love that unlimited earning potential. They love being their own boss, setting their own hours, and helping people buy or sell real estate. Relo's got a team of online instructors that are ready around the clock to help you out. They're going to help you study for your exam. They're going to make sure you get licensed properly, get your business set up, and the supports don't end there. You can learn more about the Relo Advantage by checking them out online. And don't forget, because you're hearing about this on Real Talk, there's a great benefit for you. If you use that promo code Ryan100, they're going to knock $100 off both the Alberta Residential Real Estate Bundle and the Alberta Commercial Real Estate Bundle. That's Ryan100. When you get started online at relo.ca. How many times, Johnny, do you think I can get away with saying the Nathan Fillion Civilian Pavilion today? It just rolls off the tongue. And I'm looking forward to talking to our next three guests about it because, in a way, they're the ones that made this happen. Do you know what we're talking about? We'll show you here on Instagram. This was the video that went out just a few days ago. You know Nathan Fillion, obviously the Edmonton born and raised theater star that went on to achieve great things, international success and stardom down in California and around the world. Well, Mr. Fillion himself appears to have visited the old Strathcona neighborhood. He has seen the installation of the Nathan Fillion Civilian Pavilion. I mean, there is some speculation that maybe this could be green screened and AI generated. Do you think the video is real, Johnny? After having seen it, do you think it's real?
I haven't looked at it closely. It looks real to me.
I want to have faith in it. I want to believe that he has actually seen it. So let's get to our Real Talk Roundtable, a very special edition on this Wednesday as we welcome back to the show a very good friend of ours. She is the CEO of the Edmonton Downtown Business Association, Puneeta McBryan. It's nice to see you again, my friend.
Good to be here.
You're here with a couple of good friends. Kalen Anderson is the CEO of Build Edmonton Metro. It's an organization that's just been formed. In fact, if people are going, wait a second, I've never heard of this, it's because it officially launches today, doesn't it?
Yep, today's the day.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
This is the amalgamation of the UDI, the Urban Development Institute, and the Canadian Home Builders Association, right, Kalen?
That's right.
So you've been active in Edmonton city building from a ton of different angles for coming up on 20 years, and a household name when people are talking about community building in Edmonton. It's awesome to have you around our roundtable.
Thanks.
And Amos, you reached out to us. Amos Kajner-Nonnekes, a partner and director of design with Vignettes, which is an experiential design build studio working on public and private projects across the western part of the country. And you're the one that reached out to us first when we were talking about the Civilian Pavilion. And you said there's something here. There's fodder for a talk show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, welcome to the show. What is it about this that this is something that you worked on, first of all? And I know that there's some credit to be shared.
Absolutely.
Like, we want to recognize Lauren Hunter of Sonic 102.9, a good friend of ours, radio personality. I think she, as far as I know, she's the one that coined the name.
Absolutely, yeah. And you know what? It's weird because this has been following me around for the last 6 or 7 years. In 2018, I worked for the city in the kind of the downtown investment group, and we were working on this thing called the Warehouse Campus Park project, big, massive Central Park downtown. And that's when Lauren Hunter started her kind of campaign for the Nathan Fillion Civilian Pavilion.
Which I think was sort of joking at the beginning.
Absolutely, yeah. And it kind of took off a little bit. And, you know, being the young intern on the team, I had to go on Lauren's show and give the response that we're taking all names into consideration, and we love the creativity. And now 6 years later, it's really cool that it's come to life in an interesting way, because we didn't plan any of this. We built all of these parklets as a part of a larger placemaking project, and a community member, Mark from Vivid Print, actually kind of took this on and named the parklet himself, and it's taken on its own life.
Yeah, we want to recognize Vivid Print, which is an independent retail store on Whyte Avenue, on 82nd Avenue in Edmonton. They do amazing work. Typically, something like this would be frowned upon, right? Like a business taking it upon themselves to start slapping branding onto public infrastructure. Typically, it'd be torn down in 24 hours.
Yeah, but you know what? I love it, because the whole point of placemaking is community-led, community-driven, and really when the community buys into what you're doing, it's like the gold standard for a placemaking project. So the worst thing would be to put all these parklets down. No one uses them. You know, they get random graffiti on them. They're like wastelands. But people are actually using them and buying into them, and the community is really taking hold of this and naming them. And I think it's just great. It's like the gold standard of a placemaking project to have the community buy into what you're doing.
Are you calling them parklets? Is that what you're saying?
Parklets, yeah. It's they're essentially patios that are designed and built. They're permanent pieces that get put in the parking lane and provide people a little bit of space off Whyte Avenue.
Okay. When we talk about placemaking, what's the principle of placemaking?
I don't know if there's one principle, but I think Amos said it well, which is that people feel connected to where they are in a very intimate and personal way. So the environment's not sterile, it's not hostile, it's not foreign, it's your home, it's your living room, it's your place. So when you think about, an urban space, it's kind of like your house. So if you love it, you'll put up, nice paintings and good furniture, and you'll clean it. And if you don't care about it, or you don't have any sort of sense of pride in place, you'll just let it get into disrepair. So the act of actually placemaking is essentially a form of exterior decorating, in a way.
And you know that some people automatically are going to bristle when they hear Amos talking, Puneeta, because they're going to go, I knew it. It's taking away parking spaces. Now, this is not, you're the CEO of the Edmonton Downtown Business Association. This specific parklet that we're talking about is not downtown, but there's been a ton of initiatives similar to this in Edmonton's downtown as part of a bigger, what do you call it, a reinvention?
Yeah, and actually I want to what Amos was saying, so also shared credit goes to the Old Strathcona Business Association.
Definitely.
So my counterparts south of the river. The amount of work behind the scenes to make something like what is now the Nathan Fillion Civilian Pavilion happen, it's stuff that people don't see. So the amount of work that my colleague Cherie Clausen and her team in Old Strathcona had to do to convince the city to let them do this, to apply for grant funding, to get vignettes, to build these things, to get buy-in from the community, to get businesses on board for parking being taken away, to get them excited about and convinced that more places for people to hang out and exist and enjoy the street was more valuable than those few parking stalls. Like, huge shout out to Cherie and the team at the Old Strathcona Business Association, because it can be really easy, and historically, business associations were probably the ones that were saying no bike lanes, no taking away parking for any reason, parking is king. That is sort of the stereotypical view of businesses and business associations, and that's not the case anymore. And I do occasionally have to go toe to toe with a business who's very concerned about any infringement on parking. But COVID really taught us a lot of lessons about what is a more valuable use of public space. And when People had nowhere that they could go inside. We could only dine outside. And, so we were extending patios out into the street and taking over entire parking lanes to do that. We did that on 104th Street during the pandemic. It is so much better for business when people just want what Kalen was saying, when people want to be in a place, when people feel a sense of pride of place, they feel like our downtown and our public spaces is an extension of their backyard and their home, and there's a reason for them to leave their home and spend time and spend money. That's actually really, really good for business. Much better and much more valuable than, a stall where one customer can park for maybe 15 minutes, run in and then leave, which is also important. There's a lot more that we can do with our public spaces, and it doesn't have to be parking either. We've got tons of land, and we've done stuff on vacant parking lots, like basically abandoned gravel lots. We worked with vignettes right in the depths of the pandemic in 2021. We made a pop-up park of our own because there just wasn't anywhere for people to hang out and eat out downtown. So you could grab your takeout and then go to this little park that we made on a gravel parking lot that was super fun. And then all the way to alleys. We've totally transformed and taken over back alleys to make them brighter and lighter and more fun and
alleys
enjoyable.
Are like the new thing, right?
Yeah, we've done 2 alleys downtown now, and it's just these little interventions to change a place and make it worth visiting and improve public safety outcomes and create tourist attractions and visitor attractions. We're having a lot of fun with it.
Typically, the general public needs to be convinced that this is a good idea.
I think to a certain extent. What Puneeta was saying, this has been a 4-year project, this Whyte Avenue placemaking project. It started during the pandemic with Cherie and the Old Strathcona Business Association, just providing more space for people on Whyte because of the pandemic. And it turned into more of this placemaking and getting people to linger a little bit on Whyte Avenue. What we realized kind of early on is that we're actually making the economic case for loitering on Whyte Avenue. Because the longer, and there's research to back this up. We've done our own research on Whyte Avenue. The OSBA has done a lot of research on this. The longer people spend in a space, ultimately the more money they're going to spend at local businesses on Whyte Avenue. And so if you walk down Whyte, on a hot summer's day, it's kind of like there's not a lot of sidewalk space. You're kind of getting shuffled, like one-way traffic. You can't go off and have a coffee and eat an ice cream cone and kind of take stock of your surroundings and stop into that little mom and pop shop that you might have walked right past. But when you can linger and loiter a little bit longer, there's a huge economic benefit to that. Way more than one car parking space will provide to, not just the one business that it's in front of, but to the 600 businesses that are throughout the whole district. And so that's kind of, I think, key to a lot of the work that we're all doing is getting people to stay in spaces longer, getting people to come either downtown or in Old Strathcona, not just, drive, pick something up and leave, but stay in the district a bit longer because ultimately it's going to have a big economic benefit. Look what the playoffs are doing. When thousands of people are downtown for an extended period of time, eating dinner before the game, going to the game, getting drinks after the game, there's a huge economic benefit to having people here. And we're just trying to, contribute to that in a way we can.
Yeah. Do you buy into the idea that certain cities are car cities? You hear that all the time from people that say the city is built, and it could be city X, it could be anywhere in the country or anywhere around the world for that matter. And I've seen lots of pushback. People will say, well, look what they've done in, I don't know off the top of my head, Holland might be a good example, or Denmark would be a good example. But people will say, a city like Edmonton or like Calgary, they're car cities. They're built around that premise that everybody has a car. Everybody needs a car to get around. Is that true to a certain degree? Do you buy into that, or do you push back on that?
Every single city is designed fundamentally around the transportation technology of the day. So old port cities in Europe were designed around commercial boats. Little ancient medieval cities like Dubrovnik in Croatia are essentially designed for walking and some use of horses, but barely. When you get into, a city like Chicago, where there were streetcar suburbs, you suddenly have this commuter rail that's shaping the city. And then when you have communities that were essentially developed after the Second World War, Calgary is that city, Edmonton is that city, the dominant form of transportation is the car. So, it's a car city. But the cool thing about the way that all of our infrastructure is designed, it's just a moment in time, and we can adapt it, we can reuse it, we can change it, and we have a lot of potential. So one of the cool things I like about pop-ups is that they can be a bit messy, they can get destroyed, they can be total flops. I've participated in many flops, and they often are flops. But sometimes they're winners, and when they're winners, what that tells you, and what I think we'll learn, I'm just putting it out there now on Whyte Avenue, is that the dominant mode of transportation on Whyte Avenue is pedestrian. Yeah. So this gives rationale for kind of blowing out those lanes, building wider sidewalks, investing in plazas, creating more public space. And we're very visual. Like, we need to see things to understand how they work. And so you might look at a parking space and think, well, that's a hostile environment for a pedestrian. Yeah, it sure is. But imagine you do like 15 parklets, and then suddenly you don't even perceive that anymore. You think it's an extension of the sidewalk, and then suddenly the conversation happens about, well, do we want to keep it? And everybody's like, hell yeah, we want to keep it. So that's kind of how it works.
Have any of you read the book Palaces for the People? Have you heard about this?
No.
I want to give a shout out to Cole Boyd, is in our live YouTube chat right now. He's one of the owners of Bent Stick Brewing. Shout out to Bent Stick Brewing. But apparently he's recommending, he says anybody interested in placemaking should read this book. Says it's a phenomenal conversation on exactly what we're talking about. Looks like you can check out aspenideas.org. Palaces for the People, how social infrastructure can help fight inequality, polarization, and the decline of civic life. Always love a good recommendation. Would you tell us about one of the projects that was a flop?
Yeah.
And why you think it was?
Yep, for sure. So
not to focus on the negatives, but we can learn from that, right?
Lots of flops. So I was actually on Whyte Avenue, and I feel terrible for not remembering the exact alley. It's since been named. Maybe you can help me.
Spurline.
Yes. Spurline. So initially there was this idea that there was this kind of connection point that people used all the time. I used to work at an old restaurant, or a restaurant that used to be there, called Three Musketeers, and it was obviously a pedestrian route. And so we, when I was working at the city, we thought, well, the trick is paint. Just paint it. No, that is not the trick. Paint is not infrastructure, FYI. You can lay down every color you want, but if you don't do anything more sensible, it'll just like peel off, rot off, and actually look embarrassingly worse than the decrepit alley that was there before. So unless you have a thoughtful plan and you understand what you're up to, and you think like, you can't just take an old alley and throw down polka dots and hope that it's an animated space. You need lighting, you need planters, you need wayfinding, you need something to draw people in and make them feel safe. So that was a total flop. But the cool thing is that it was improved later. It just kept getting redone and redone and redone. And now I think it's currently being redone. Being redone
again. Yeah, you know what? I redid it as one of my first projects.
Do you agree that it was a flop?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And you know what? We painted it again. We did this beautiful rainbow road. Like, it kind of went viral for a month or two during the one summer. But then the same thing happened, where unless you maintain it and repaint it all the time, it kind of, and this is just the nature of painting like the ground on bad asphalt.
In Edmonton, especially.
In Edmonton,
or
yeah,
anywhere.
especially, and kind of not having a caretaker for the space. But once the patio spilled out from molten mortar a little bit onto that kind of Rainbow Road, Spurline Alley, once people stopped driving down there, once people started walking to the back of Made by Marcus, and Made by Marcus opened up and you can walk to the back and grab ice cream, like all those things came together, and it's a much more inviting space now. I still think there needs to be a lot of work in that alleyway, but there are always going to be these things that are, we can call them flops, but we're also learning a lot from that kind of, you can't just build it and they'll come.
Well, you can't call something a pilot if you're not willing to fail. If you only expect that your pilot will succeed, you're gaming the process.
100%. Yeah, and
So
if you have a predetermined outcome of what you want, like, what's the point of doing a pilot? Just do the project anyways. If it's to learn something and then take action after it. And learn something and actually do something with what you've learned.
Yeah. Shout out to quick in the live chat. James says another great book on a related subject to placemaking, How We Gather Matters by Leor Rothschild. Says it's about having greener social gatherings. This is like a whole thing.
It really is, yeah. And we learned some lessons from those projects. And so when we did Lulu Lane downtown, we took inspiration from Vancouver's Alley-Oop. So downtown Vancouver did Alley-Oop right before COVID, I think, and it was like a basketball hoop and this like stunning pastel colored transformation of an alleyway. And the key things there are you need businesses who are willing to sort of use the space. So yeah, there was, parties that were held back there. But again, as soon as it's not being used and as soon as there's not enough money to adequately maintain it, it starts looking pretty cruddy. So we when we did Lulu Lane, we did not do the pavement. We only did the walls, and we picked an alley that was already a pedestrian route that people were using, where the businesses sort of on the edges saw like an opportunity to put some seating in and use the space. But again, it's like, paint can be transformational, but it's how you use the space and what people do and how people are drawn into that space that really matters. The confetti wall in Michael Fair Park is another great example.
Is this photo that you emailed to me? I'm just showing it in my inbox right now.
Yeah, the yellow walls is Lulu Lane, is one of the alleys that we did. That's the confetti wall. Yeah, that's Michael Fair Park. And the people that you see there, that's one of the Edmonton Queer History Project's walking tours. So they do walking tours throughout the summer. And the confetti wall and confetti park, Michael Fair Park, is one of the gathering places for them. And so it's like one of these examples of, it becomes this sort of landmark. It becomes this place that people just want to be. And, you know, I sort of cringed in the beginning of doing these kinds of projects every time I said the word Instagrammable.
Oh, I was just going to ask you about that.
But I've stopped cringing at it because my whole career before this, like unlike these two, I'm not a planner. I was in marketing and advertising before this. So it's like, that's essentially what we're doing. We're branding and we're creating products and we're creating share-worthy content when we're putting stuff downtown, and whether it's temporary or permanent, just creating stuff that creates that buzz that people want to share photos of, want to take selfies in front of, helps get people downtown, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do.
That is a thing. That is definitely the thing. The sort of the Instagrammable nature of a space, and restaurateurs are paying attention to that now. And I mean, it is a thing. Maybe we'll get into what people are looking for and how that's evolved, and maybe how. What do you call it? Like community member? I don't want to say customer demand, but how community member demand is influencing not just spaces, or not just, what are they called again? Parklets?
Parklets, yeah.
Parklets.
Or street infrastructure, street furniture.
But what about like the vision of an entire city and how a city grows over the next, like Edmonton has a city plan, don't they, over the next like 40 or 50 years? Mm-hmm. We'll get into that in just a quick second with our panel, but I want to let you know that this conversation and conversations like these don't happen without the support of amazing partners like our friends at Complete Care Restoration. We want to say, just on the record, obviously our thoughts are with our friends, our fellow Albertans, our fellow Canadians in the RM of Wood Buffalo and the Fort McMurray area right now. Obviously, it's wildfire season. That's a reality. Our thoughts are with you. As many of you are evacuating as quickly and as safely as you can. Complete Care Restoration is doing work in dozens of Alberta communities, helping people restore their properties and rebuild their peace of mind after wildfire, floods, and the like. They're experts in remediation of black mold, asbestos, you name it. They've got a professional property restoration teams ready to respond 24/7 if, heaven forbid, disaster strikes. Don't forget to get in touch with Complete Care Restoration. Pathways Alliance is the 6 biggest companies in Alberta's oil sands working with different levels of government, the provincial government, the federal government, on a path to reach net zero emissions from operations. They know that global energy demands are changing. The world wants responsibly produced oil, and Pathways Alliance wants to show the world that Alberta can produce that. They're working on a carbon capture and storage network that ultimately will reduce emissions, preserve existing jobs, and create new employment opportunities. If you want to learn more about the path to net zero in Alberta's oil sands, you can check out pathwaysalliance.ca. Our friends at Friesen Brothers want to remind you that they are now in 17 different Alberta communities with the opening of Friesen Brothers Glenora, our congratulations to them. That includes their garden centers, which are now open. You know, more than half the plants that they sell at Friesen Brothers Garden Centers are actually grown right here in Alberta, so that means they're perfectly suited for Alberta weather. Even the potting soil is made right here in Alberta. You can find out more information, plus get some great tips from some of their growers, some of their suppliers, by visiting friesen.com/garden center. And this is a message to Real Talkers from across the country, maybe even outside Canada right now. If you're eager to pursue a post-secondary goal, but there's been barriers in the way, it could be the geography where you're at. You're not anywhere close to a brick and mortar university. It could be your time crunches. You're part of that sandwich generation, caring for your parents, caring for your kids. Maybe it's been a financial barrier that stood in the way. There are so many advantages to studying at Athabasca University. They're driven by a strong commitment to empower learners worldwide. You can learn more about their online undergrad programs, grad programs, courses, professional development opportunities, and in my mind, what might be the most underrated MBA in the country. You can get started on that today by visiting athabascau.ca. Prompted by the Nathan Fillion Civilian Pavilion, we're talking to placemakers, designers, planners, Amos Kajner-Nonnekes, Kalen Anderson, and Puneeta McBryan, our guests. How has the average person changed in what they're looking for from their community? We hear a lot of talk. As soon as I say 15-minute cities, the algorithm's going to pick this up, and we're going to start getting people in the comment sections because there's a lot of conspiracy theories that abound and the like. But it kind of comes back to that idea that people are looking for walkable communities, right? They're looking for more convenience. How have we evolved from? When was the last big sort of like build out? The 1950s, the post-war era? What's changed in the last 50 or 75 years?
Oh gosh, we're booming right now. I just want to address 15-minute cities and let everybody know that if there is a vast global conspiracy to control us, the absolute worst way to do so would be long-term urban planning, okay? A 40-year policy document wouldn't be the way to do it. So, I'm not going to dispute the actual facts of the matter in terms of people's opinions about what they're thinking on, but I would say don't worry about the urban planning. That's not the way to get anything done in any bureaucracy or it's civil society. It's slow moving. It's clunky. We're all here mucking about for years and decades on end.
But it's easy to whip people into a frenzy over the idea.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Politically, it's very convenient.
I mean, I guess so. You have to connect quite a few dots. So right now, I guess one of the things the reason that this is even germane at this time is because the city plan was approved in 2020. We got a brand new, that's our kind of long range plan to grow from 1 to 2 million people, a doubling of our population, which is ambitious, but very realistic considering that Alberta pulled in over 200,000 more migrants last year alone. And then we had a brand new zoning bylaw approved in October, which is pretty transformational. And I think it's the most kind of ambitious probably across North America, and we'd got way more done than Calgary did last night after 100 hours of public hearing.
I want to ask you about that.
One
by the way.
zone. They changed one zone. We changed every zone. But congratulations to Calgary, and good work on your public process. I know it was exhausting. I have friends who literally sat there for all of the days. But the next big move in Edmonton is to do district planning. So that's what's coming up this month, and this is the idea of a community of communities appreciating that our city is simply too large. It already is too large, and it definitely will be much too large to really live in the whole city at once. And nobody actually lives in Edmonton. They live in their pockets. And the best way to have an efficient place to live and work and shop is if you have things close to home. So this idea of creating these district plans, there'll be 15 of them, and that'll reduce the chaos in the planning environment of having hundreds of separate discombobulated plans, which is the current state, and it will also allow us to get a lot more strategic and focused. And the last thing maybe I'll say about this idea of how we live in Edmonton and how we're growing is that because we don't live everywhere, we have little kind of rat tracks that all of us run back and forth on, and we even self-identify as from parts of the city, and we all know where we live. We are not trapped in our segments, but emotionally and intellectually, we're pretty rooted in. We stay in our spots. So when you are living in your place, it's not good enough to have a cool downtown. If you're in Southwest Edmonton, you need Southwest Edmonton to be baller. Same is true for Northeast Edmonton. Everybody deserves to have their spot. So to bring this all back to the Nathan Fillion Civilian Pavilion, which I'm glad I got to have my chance to say. The neat thing about interventions like Amos is doing is that if they work, and like I said, they don't always work, and it's cool that they don't always work, but when they do work, what you've identified is what has been called by Ken Greenberg from Toronto, urban acupuncture. You can't solve the whole city at once. You can't fix everything everywhere. And frankly, if you spread good ideas around in a chaotic and diluted way, nothing good will happen. So when you figure out where that spot is, you need to hit it with everything you've got. And when you hit it with everything you've got, you create a magnet, you create vibrancy, you create attraction, and then you literally embed those living rooms that I was talking about earlier. So you can't impose them via government fiat. They have to be voted on by people's feet. So what Amos does for a living is test out people's foot traffic, and then Puneeta can be like, oh, hey, that one works, or ooh, that one not so much. And then when it does work, pull everybody in and just make it roll. So I think that's the cool part about city building, is that it's grandiose and it's long term, but actually truly each of us will just go out of this studio today. We'll buy a coffee at our local shop. We'll go to work. We'll go home. We'll do our chores. And that's where we need living to be its best, is in those spaces.
And because it's gotten so hard to get people to leave their neighborhood in this post-COVID world that we live in, you don't have to go downtown to go to work. You don't have to leave your neighborhood at all if we're building great neighborhoods. It is that much more important that we make downtown worth spending time in. And so that's why, like all those images that you showed, we're doing so many things that seem probably from the outside, especially if you don't fully understand what we're doing, they might seem kind of kooky, and you might be confused about why the Downtown Business Association is putting inflatable monsters on rooftops. But it's like, we just have to make downtown exceptional and unique and fun, and we have to redefine what a downtown is even for. Like, why would you want to come downtown on the weekend or during the week to go to work? Why would you want to move downtown and live here so we can get more residential development done downtown? So we have to make downtown, like any other neighborhood, just a great neighborhood to live in and hang out in, and Old Strathcona is in the same boat too. How do we make these areas even cooler and more enticing than they ever have been, because it's so much harder to pull people away from their
This is not a cheap shot at the OSB, at the Old Strathcona Business Association, nor Old Strathcona. Everyone should see the three of their eyes right now. They're like, "What are you about to drag? What are you about to drag us into?" But Whyte Avenue, over the past 20 years that I've lived here, it seems like it's kind of. It felt like it had like a real Seattle vibe to it, and then it's felt like it's kind of become a little bastardized over the past 10 years or so, right? Like, gone go the independents, in come the chains, and like you see like 7-Eleven was there for a brief period of time, and like, I'm not saying Chapters was like a ma and pa store, but now there's like Winners there, and people are kind of like, you get what I'm getting at. Like, I think people would, and Boston Pizza is a great Edmonton success story for sure, but like, I think people would rather have like, Michelina's Pizza or some like ma and pa shop. You know what I mean? Like, that stuff though can't be like manufactured, can it? Like, if you're landlords, if you're just trying to get the spaces leased, you're probably less concerned. Well, maybe not. I don't speak for them. I don't have experience in that realm, but maybe less concerned with like the fabric of the community and more concerned with like having a legit tenant that's going to pay their rent every single month. Like how much of this can be orchestrated and curated? You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm getting at here?
Yeah, when we go with pure capitalism, yeah, like often the tenant with like the most money. Yeah, the most money and the most secure, lease terms is probably going to win out. But that's actually something that's, I think, is a silver lining of downtown. Like, and you and I have had this conversation on the show before. Yeah. A lot of people in my world will lament, the old days of downtown. We used to have Holt Renfrew. We used to have the Bay, and for sure, those are massive losses. But we're in a situation now where our downtown is over 80% at the street front, over 80% local and independently owned businesses. So it's sort of been this little...
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, think about it. When you walk around in downtown Edmonton, how many big chains do you see? How many even national chains do you see? It's a result of, unfortunately, a lot of this real estate for the last 5 years or so not being the most desirable in the city. And so who do you have who's willing to take a bet on our downtown and on our city? It's the independents. It's entrepreneurs that just like really give a shit about Edmonton and have a cool idea. And you've got some local landlords who are willing to make a bet on those small entrepreneurs. Dan Costa being the perfect example of that, who's now obviously, when he opened his first restaurant, nobody knew who he was.
Corso was the first one, right? Corso 32.
Sure was, yeah. So, I mean, there's so many of those incredible stories. And we hope to see more of that in terms of retail and not just, restaurants. But there's something really powerful, and I think more what people want out of a main street and a downtown, which is that sort of like creative, unique, local, independent flair that we're trying to hold on to. Like ideally things turn around, and they already are. And my biggest problem once again becomes there's not enough parking downtown. That would be amazing. But then how do we hold on to this like independent mix of business when all of a sudden the national chains want to be downtown again? So that's something I'm going to be thinking about.
Yeah, and you know what? I would push back a bit on the Whyte Avenue comments.
Please do.
If you talk to Shree from the Old Strathcona business, if you kind of look at during the pandemic and then a couple of years after the pandemic, Whyte Avenue fared a lot better than a lot of other areas in the city, with vacancy rates a lot lower than downtown and then some other cities as well. And there have been a couple of, obviously chapters going to winners. That's a good and a bad thing. I think it's good that a large chain is actually putting confidence in an area like Whyte Avenue and leasing a very large space.
Yeah, like better if it's better than sitting empty.
100%. Yeah, and if you look at the people that actually own those buildings on Whyte Avenue, the majority of the people that own those buildings are not institutional investors. They're kind of like mom and pop developers who have a family that had a building passed down through many years. Not to say the downtown's like full of institutional developer investors, but a lot of the buildings are owned by, larger development firms that are in the business of developing. Whyte Avenue has not only independent stores, but independent building owners as well. And so you get an interesting mix there where they're also looking for businesses that align with them and align with the avenue. And so, there have been some losses, of course, both downtown and Whyte Avenue. But I think over the next even 2 years, you'll see a lot more popping up on Whyte Avenue. The vacancy rate is very low. And there's some loss of mom and pop shops, but there's still a very eclectic mix of businesses. And this kind of ties into a bit of the design ethos that we put into these street furniture projects and these parklets on Whyte Avenue. We looked at Whyte Avenue, and it's such a cool place because there's these old historic buildings. It's all a historic area. These really old buildings, brick, brown, kind of old-time vibes, with these really cool eclectic businesses inside of them. Like you can step into a 200-year-old building and there's a new age club in there, or this kind of wacky store that you can buy gifts for your children or something. So we kind of boiled that down into the street furniture where they're really poppy pink and blue colors with historic Indonesian hardwood on top. And so that's what I think is so cool about Whyte Avenue is you've got this really kind of heritage area, but this eclectic group of really interesting new age businesses that's really, I think, unique to Whyte Avenue in Old Strathcona.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I do agree. You've got the winners in a couple of chains, but Whyte Ave definitely is still a really local mix of kooky business. Like the old style of Whyte Ave, if you really walk down the Ave, you can see that. And 124th Street too, like to shout out another one of our best 100%. Main streets, very low vacancy rate. You cannot get a retail space on 124th Street because every single bay is full of really cool local businesses.
Yeah, which is great. And there have been a couple like Gut Punch restaurant closures in that area for people outside of Edmonton. It's a great kind of a pedestrian area. We live near there. We love it. But it's been awesome to see confidence return in so many ways. As every restaurant that closes seems to see one pop open within a number of months, which is good. I don't mean to pick a fight with the Old Strathcona business owners now. I picked a fight, I guess, with Alberta NDP members yesterday. Suggesting they were being infiltrated by the federal Liberals. Today I'm picking a fight with Old Strathcona. I want to pick up on Calgary's zoning because I picked up just on the tiniest little bit of cynicism from you, and I want to see if I'm interpreting it correctly, but to get your take on it, certainly an informed opinion from all three of you. Their council voting to approve this just hours before we're talking here. But it was interesting because the public hearings on this blanket rezoning in Calgary were like 70% against it, yet it passes. Plus, I want to pick your brain more, Amos, on the science of what you do. How did you put it, Kalen? You said he studies people's foot traffic or something like that. I'd love to get into it and understand how you do that and how people sort of convey those messages and how you push people maybe outside or communities outside of their comfort zone. That's coming up in just a quick second. But every single week it's a tradition here on our show, courtesy of our friends at Tourism Jasper, to take you out to the mountains. It's MyJasper Memories. And of course, we're talking to you just a couple of days. If you're listening to this either live or later on the day we're doing this, we're coming up to the May long weekend, and Jasper National Park is obviously an incredible destination for those of you long weekend warriors. So we thought we'd give you the top 5 to-dos in Jasper National Park through May long. It all starts with spring hiking. So long as you're prepared for a variety of conditions, weather in the mountains obviously can change quickly, especially in spring. Hitting the trails during this season, spring season, can be extraordinarily lovely. Go with a guide if you want to get your fresh air with a side of helpful tips, locals' insights, and fascinating information about the local ecosystem. You can check out jasper.travel for more on that. We'll link to it in the show notes. They've also got their Uplift Mural Festival happening right now, which is a super cool initiative. This is Jasper's colorful mural festival happening through the month of May. Uplift brings esteemed muralists to town to transform some of Jasper's walls. Hey, it's kind of like what we're talking about right now today. Shout out to Jasper. You can join one of their free walking tours and witness art in action. Also wanted to let you know that the campgrounds are open in Jasper. This is an awesome time of year. I know a lot of you are going to be getting those tents out for the first time, firing up those stoves again, happening through this entire month. Whistler's Campground they opened on May 8th. Wapiti, Snaring, Honeymoon Lake are opening on the 15th. I think that's today, isn't it? Yeah, that's today. So shout out to all of those campgrounds. Even more will be opening in June. You can check out parks.canada.ca for more on that. And then, of course, summer activities are coming up, and the hotels are starting to get going on that. Starting May long weekend, a lot of the hotels, cabins, the activities are opening, including rafting on Jasper's heritage rivers. There's nothing quite like the lazy float down the Athabasca River. Bound to see wildlife on the shores. We saw a couple of grizzlies. We saw some incredible falcons in action. I mean, just a beautiful experience there. And the world-famous golf course at Canada's top golf resort, that's Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge, has just opened up as well. You can check out more, book a tea time out at the Fairmont JPL by visiting the link in the show notes. Don't forget, there's also canoe tours and so many other options, including with Wild Current Outfitters guided tours. They're open now. It's a quintessential Canadian experience. The lakes are still quiet and calm. You're going to feel like they're made just for you. If you do get out there, we'd love to see your photos. If you're posting on Instagram or Twitter, make sure you use the hashtags MyJasper and Real Talk RJ every week. MyJasper Memories is presented proudly by our friends at Tourism Jasper. Hanging out with three placemakers, city builders, designers, and just all-around great community members, Puneeta McBryan, Amos Kajner-Nonnekes, and Kalen Anderson. Can we talk about the Calgary bylaw thing for a second? Sure. I'll be honest with you, this is the type of thing my eyes glaze over a little bit when we start talking about like zoning and rezoning. But it is actually significant and important, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people have been buzzing about Calgary's council approving, not unanimously, but a blanket citywide rezoning that, correct me if I'm wrong, at first glance, at the most basic level, allows for more density or encourages more density. So in areas that have been zoned for single family development, single family dwellings, you're now going to see like duplexes, townhouses, row houses, fourplexes, that type of a thing. Calgary's mayor, speaking out in support of it, says it's huge for Calgary's housing strategy. But I heard that, anecdotally, about 70% of the people that attended these public hearings, public town halls, were kind of against the idea. Not everybody loves to see it. What are your thoughts on whether or not it was a good move?
Oh yeah, it was a necessary move. It's not, Calgary is not an original. They're kind of slow to the game, actually. Okay. They're way behind many other cities in North America. And frankly, they already committed to pursuing this through the acceptance of housing accelerator funding from the federal government and the approval of their housing strategy last September, which was also involving, as I recall, days and days, including a Saturday, of vigorous debate. So, I think it's been interesting to watch the public conversation in Calgary, even the way it's being depicted as blanket rezoning, as though some sort of, dark mat is being thrown over the whole city. The duplexes are coming. Like, come on, relax. It's fine. There's not that much market demand in our cities for all of this infill that will now be allowed. All it means is that it's allowed. And so Edmonton, I'm just really proud of our city. We're a lot cooler, calmer, more collected on these matters of urban planning conversation. And we always have been. Edmonton's a funny little town. Like we're kind of pragmatic. We just sort of we get it done without a lot of fanfare. But like I said, we've been working on infill in this town for 15 years, doggedly. And we changed our zone 6 years ago without anybody talking about it. We also removed parking minimums 3 years ago without anybody talking about it. And then we overhauled the entire zoning bylaw, which is basically the rules that tell you what you can or can't build in a certain location. We did that without great fanfare in October. So I think
there
it's-
was some pushback, though, right?
Of course.
In
Yeah, yeah.
particular, the former Alberta Liberal leader, Kevin Taft, was spearheading a group that was really pissed off about this.
Yeah, well, so when you mentioned like in Calgary, 70% of people were opposed, like go to any public hearing any day of the week in any town.
The angry folks are more likely to show up.
Nobody shows up to say, I love your land use designation update. That is so boring. And if you have things to do, why on earth would you get excited about that? So I think, you can't do public hearing is not public polling. The reason that we elect city council is so that they can, in their wisdom, individually on behalf of their wards and collectively as stewards of the whole city, make a decision in terms of weighing the pros and cons, the evidence, and understanding the implications. So, every time we have a public hearing, it's not an opportunity for a public debate, debate is fine, but not public vote. It's not a popularity contest.
It's not a referendum.
It's not a referendum. So, these zoning decisions don't come out of nowhere. It's not like, surprise, we're rezoning you. Usually there's years of policy and many public conversations and lots of, frankly, alternatives kicked around. So Calgary, I'm proud of them for getting through it. It took them, I've never heard in Canada, honestly, of 1,000 people registering to speak. That, hats off to those city clerks and councillors and administrators and all the folks who lined up and waited for their turn to come up on date 8 or whatever it was. But they got it done. They got it done, and, I'd encourage them to keep going.
Yeah, I just feel that I'm just the biggest cynic of everyone, and I'm just like, if I hear of 1,000 people that want to speak at a town hall, that's like reason number 47 why I would never be a city councillor, because I don't think that I could listen to 1,000 different perspectives on something. Quite frankly,
and they're not different.
I'd lose
They're
interest
not
after
different. That's the problem.
You know what I mean? It's almost like you need to have spokespersons where it's like, this person represents the townhouse owner, this person represents the renters, but I know you can't run it that way, and that's not democracy in action, but I just think it just like, that is my worst nightmare.
But also these processes have kind of been taken over by these little campaigns that groups will run. So there'll be like a homeowners protection association. I once got a threatening tweet from a guy who claimed to be from the Surface Parking Lot Owners Rights Association. What? Because he didn't like that I was saying that surface parking lots shouldn't all be gravel and crumbling. So, there's like these,
can I interrupt? Do you buy into the idea? I heard an Edmonton city councillor, Andrew Knack, and I don't want to sort of drag him into this and misrepresent him, but the city had sort of like given the Cates Group, for people listening outside, this is like basically the owners of the Oilers and basically the big shot developers downtown. The city had like extended their allowance to keep gravel parking lots, and I don't know the details and the nuance, because like I said, my eyes glaze over with this type of stuff, but people were pissed off, being like, oh, they're allowing them to just keep this and not do anything with it. And Andrew Knack made the counter argument. He said, listen, if you force them to paving it makes it more permanent. If you keep it gravel, it's more likely to be turned into something else. Is that BS, or
no,
is
not
that
BS
legit?
At all. I totally agree. The problem is there needs to be a standard. So when people complain about gravel parking lots, we're usually complaining about the ones that like the gravel is spilling out everywhere and there's riddled with potholes and the curbs are crumbling and they just look like crap and they wreck your car and you roll your ankle when you walk through them. Like, there's a difference between a well-maintained, perfectly usable gravel parking lot, which I would argue the ones that got extended from Kate's group are well-maintained and totally functional parking lots that are not like massive eyesores, and then the ones that we're usually complaining about, which are much, much worse. But that's a much bigger conversation. But my point about the whole public hearing process is just like, you'll have a few community organizers who throw out a few talking points, and people like yourself, Ryan, whose eyes glaze over and don't really want to read the thing being debated.
It's true, I don't.
But who take the talking points that their neighbors shared with them at face value.
Kalen, I don't want to read it. I just want to have an opinion on it. I don't want to read it.
Urban planning policy is the most boring
It's
thing
so
on
horrible.
earth.
So then if you have some community organizer who's riled up, who's like, I don't want duplexes in my neighborhood, here's what it's going to do. It's going to lower our property values.
Yeah.
We're going to be overrun by renters, evil renters. You get all these talking points. You get a group of people riled up, and then you end up with 70 speakers basically speaking from a script that's been fed to them. And it really kind of bastardizes the whole process of public hearings, in my opinion, because you don't have well-informed citizens who have formed their own opinions, who are coming to share their perspective. You just have a bunch of people who put up their hand and said, yeah, I'll read that script. I'm mad too.
Well, and there's a reason, to Kalen's point, that we elect city councilors and that administration writes, reports that take a long time to curate and write for city council to view and get information on before. It's not every public hearing is like, okay, we're coming to this blank face and we're just going to listen to what people have to say, and whoever says the most about this one topic, we're going to vote that way. Or whoever comes from my ward, the most, we're going to vote that way. Like, city councilors also have to use their own, knowledge and their intelligence to make decisions that are best for their wards. Obviously, public discussion has a part to play in that, but it's not the only part. And there are obviously going to be some tough decisions that are made in the interest of the city that people that come to public hearing are opposed to. And a lot of those are good decisions that, when you take it in the grand scheme of things 2 years later, are good decisions that city council makes, even though people came to speak against it.
Can you take us into the science of how you study, as Kalen put it earlier, how you study people's foot traffic, how you study habits? That's got to be like an interesting area of application.
It is, and that's largely what kind of placemaking and urban design is. And there are a lot of like famous urban designers, Walter Whyte, that have kind of taken this from a social studies aspect, but we kind of study where people go, how they use space. At Vignettes, we're interested in designing for experience. And so we're a little intentionally unfocused on all the areas we do that in, but a big part is the city experience and how people experience space. And the kind of case that we're making with all of our work, and I take it as an economic case, is that people experiencing space, people loitering in space is good for business. When people kind of come into a space, they take ownership of it, they enjoy their stay, they have a place to go, a place to come from, and it's an enjoyable space to be in. Ultimately, they're going to spend more money at local businesses. And so we look at business improvement areas. That's a big part of the case that we make, is that when people enjoy their time more, when they have a better experience, and when they stay in a place longer and loiter, they spend more money, and it's an economic impact on the city and the businesses that are in that area. And so we can, go on the economic case. We can also just go on the social case, that people are social creatures. We want to be around other people. It's a safer space when other people are there. Empty spaces, you breed kind of social disorder and bad actors. When people are in spaces, we have this whole like eyes on the street kind of thing that everyone talks about lately. But
everybody's talking about transit. That's a good example too.
100%, right? When you're on an empty, I get that people also experience safety differently. Like I'm a middle class white dude walking down the street, maybe like one too many pints on a Tuesday night. But regardless, I experience safety way different than racialized or women or transgender individuals might experience that on the street.
Sure.
But when we have more people in spaces, especially on like transit platforms or public squares or walking down the street, we both feel safer, and it's better for the community. You look at 104th Street where we are now. Like, you walk down 104th Street after a game and it's packed, and everyone feels like this is a vibrant, safe space. And what we do is kind of study what makes people so interested in coming to 104th Street instead of 106th Street. And one, it's the businesses that are here, but 104th Street has been a project of the city for a long time. Like, this didn't just crop up, out of the blue. It's been a deliberate effort to set building standards, design standards for buildings, that buildings can only go to a certain height and then you have to step them back. Facades have to have a certain treatment, the roadway, paving, and lighting standards. Like, it's been a deliberate effort to make people have a better experience on 104th Street, which then supports people coming here, which supports businesses, having this really popular street. It's one of the best places to have a business in Edmonton.
Yeah, you can learn a lot too about what, like sort of the addition or the loss of an institution. In this case, I'm referencing, like, for example, the outdoor farmers market. Yeah. When I first moved to Edmonton, that institution drew thousands of people every Saturday down to that area. And then when it moves or is displaced or by construction or other factors, that's just one example. It's like the air coming out of a balloon, right? Like, it's very significant.
That's why we're bringing it back. back.
Yeah, I'm stoked you're bringing it back. That's going to be, it'll be interesting to see if it can like regain. I mean, I know obviously you're confident that it can, but to like immediately kind of like regain the momentum that it had, because that was like for a lot of people, that was like the weekly tradition. Like you couldn't get in at the brunch spots. You couldn't, you're waiting at the coffee shops, but nobody cared because you got your sunglasses on, you're running into people, it's great that you had to wait for a coffee. Nobody cared. Right. But
and it was before farmers market culture had really taken over in Edmonton. So we do have a lot more competitors now than we did before. And it'll be a smaller footprint because we've got LRT construction, unfortunately, taking over. It'll be great once it's done, but won't be fun while it's happening. But yeah, everything we've heard and seen is that we're going to be drowning in people, which is exactly what we want.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. One thing I would be remiss if I didn't mention in all of this is the entertainment district that is forming on Rice Howard Way. So I don't know if this has crossed your desk, but AGLC recently, as part of the provincial government, decided to move AGLC under the Minister of Red Tape Reduction, which sent a really loud signal about what this provincial government wanted to do.
Minister Nally, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they really wanted to make a clear statement that we want more industry development, we want more red tape reduction in liquor and cannabis and gaming, and let's just treat these industries more liberally, basically.
They would choose a different word.
They would choose a different word. I'm choosing the word liberally because I think it's accurate. But anyways, one of those things was to say, hey, cities, you can create an area where you basically don't need a liquor license and don't need patio fencing to have open liquor beverage containers. So the city worked really hard for us to get this done in time for the summer. And as of June 1st, all of the establishments on Rice Howard Way in downtown Edmonton can sell you a glass of wine or a beer or whatever, and you can walk right out and enjoy it on the street, and we'll have live music and other entertainment on Rice Howard Way every Saturday all summer long. Thinking more like a plaza in Europe, less Las Vegas style.
I immediately was thinking Vegas.
Yeah. If there's like a spectrum of what an entertainment district can look like, Scottsdale, I think it's a little rowdy too, even if people have ever been in their
so
area.
Good.
But yeah, that's the vibe, right? Like a place where people can, like, we're not, putting up these fences, and if you want to have a glass of wine, you have to be behind this fence, and if you want to go sit on that picnic table, you can't have a glass of wine. Like it's so silly when you really think about
it. It's like the easiest win, and I don't know why this wasn't done. It's such an easy thing to do. We're not creating like a party district or like sanctioning all these kind of things. It's just you want to take your beer outside and go walk around this beautiful square, or go outside 5 meters to enjoy the fresh air. I was just in Birmingham kind of 4 weeks ago, having a pint at a pub, and every single pub you can just walk out the front door. There's no 4 foot tall fences surrounding you with hedges. Like there's movable chairs which in placemaking and urban design, the movable chair is such a useful tool. Like instead of a bolted down bench, a movable plastic chair is like the biggest placemaking tool, because you can position it however you want. The sun's coming in, you can kind of move your chair over a little bit and have your pint in the sun. But it's such an easy win for the entertainment. Like it's such an easy win. I don't know why we didn't do this 10 years ago.
Can I jump in on that chair comment? So I got to hear from Janet Sedekon a few years ago, and she was head of transportation for New York, the DOT, Department of Transportation. Yeah. And she was really famous for trying to do massive scale placemaking. And so she had a comment about these chairs, which I just found amazing. So they brought these chairs into Times Square, and there was a lot of fear that they would all get stolen. If you can imagine filling Times Square with chairs, like that's actually a lot of inventory. She said they did not a one. And I think that just goes to show that when people respect their place and they love it, they don't damage it, they guard it, they treasure it, and it doesn't become an invitation for vandalism or theft. It becomes an invitation to linger. And I think when she told that story, like if it can work in Times Square, it can sure work in Rice Howard Way.
I will just say, not to be contrarian, but around the same time, Times Square and the city of New York implemented their cop on every corner, colloquially named, policy on Times Square. So they literally have a cop on every corner in Times Square, and that's part of how they turned Times Square into this like bustling tourist mecca, and not the really, really sort of seedy area that it was before. So very controversial part of that is putting a cop on every corner.
Would you like to see that in downtown Edmonton?
Oh, that is one of the most heavily debated parts of my job. I definitely have a lot of members who would love to see that. The question is, would it work? Would it create the kind of downtown that we want? Do you want to feel like...
What's the flip side of the debate? Is it obviously cost, and also what people are just don't like the vibe of like having a cop overseeing the...
Yeah, like you do want to live in like a police state where you're like being surveilled at all time. Like it's a different vibe. Times Square is a very, like it works from a tourist standpoint. You feel safe, and it's everyone knows that that's like a well surveilled public space.
Maybe
but
need
it
them in
doesn't
plain
feel
clothes.
like
You need like flight marshals downtown.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but it's a really good question. Like, would that address our public safety issues? Absolutely. Would we be able to put out movable chairs and not have them get stolen or thrown through windows? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of city that we want to live in? That's the bigger question.
Yeah, I also wonder about, again, the cost, right?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
It's, if you're not adding more officers, then you're pulling officers from elsewhere. And had an interesting conversation with Edmonton's Police Chief Dale McPhee just the other day at the Edmonton Real Estate Forum, and he was talking about that, how they've been trying to manage that, seeing that they have been pulling officers from other parts of the city, and then they've seen the consequences of that. He says you pull officers out of Chinatown, as example, to keep them closer to the downtown core, and then you see horrific violence unfold in Chinatown, and then you've got this issue here, and obviously I'm dropping in quickly and commenting on something that deserves its own entire episode, but yeah, something to think about for sure. When we come back from this very quick break, I want to ask the three of you in closing, what's like a trend you're keeping an eye on? What's next? What's like the parklet for 15 years from now? Where are we going? The city of the future, so to speak, here on this Real Talk Roundtable, which is happening with the support of our friends at California Closets. And if you didn't yet hear about this email we received from Beverly, this is such wonderful feedback. Beverly wrote in to say, Jasper, we're such a big fan of Real Talk. Keep asking those hard questions. Says we're in our renovation process right now. Good luck, Beverly. She says, and I've heard you talking about California Closets. I figured they would be way out of our league price-wise, but I also figured it wouldn't hurt, and I'm big on getting multiple quotes, and so I, like you said, reached out and requested that free consultation. She says, was I ever impressed with that meeting? She says, I saw the 3D visualization of all the possibilities. I can't say enough about the technology. I was surprised by the options, says Beverly, for maximizing storage in our stunningly small walk-in closet, and I couldn't believe they came in within our budget and a lifetime warranty. And then she's got that emoji, with like the head exploding. I love it, Beverly. She says, I wouldn't have even considered California Closets if I hadn't heard about them on Real Talk. So I want to thank you for highlighting this Edmonton company. I wrote Beverly back personally, and I said, if your experience is anything like mine, you're going to love this installation for years. You can get that free consultation at californiaclosets.ca. And a quick shout out to those of you that are either unemployed or underemployed, but you've got the skills to make a difference on a job site. If you have experience as an electrician, maybe you're an apprentice, if you have any experience installing solar panels, Kubi Renewable Energy wants to talk to you. Nobody is installing more solar in Western Canada than Kubi Renewable Energy. They're opening offices in Lethbridge. They're well established in Kamloops, a beautiful new location in Calgary, and of course proudly headquartered out of Alberta's capital city. Kubi is growing Canada's energy future with a young, dynamic workforce, and they'd love for you to be part of it. You can check out the careers link at kubienergy.ca. Feels like a good jumping off point, talking about the future of green energy, the future of employment. What about the future of design? What will our cities look like 20, 30, 40 years from now, Amos?
I think we're going to have a lot more emphasis on public-facing spaces, publicly owned public spaces, and a big emphasis on people and how they experience space. So one of the big things I'm looking forward to is Old Strathcona and Whyte Avenue is up for renewal in 2027. There's a plan going to committee in August, and I won't go into the specifics of this entire plan, but really what it does is focus on people and understand Whyte Avenue not as an arterial road, but as a main street, which is what it should be. There's businesses lining that entire street, and so I'm looking forward to that. I think we're going to have a lot more, again, emphasis on how people experience spaces, less emphasis on how we move ourselves through automobiles. We're always going to need cars. We're always going to need that industry. But in places like downtown and Whyte Avenue, you go to any other downtown, successful downtown, and you don't complain about getting stuck in traffic, because it's a good thing. You should be stuck in traffic when you're going through downtown. That means there's people around. That means business is thriving. That means people are walking the street and spending money, and we have a thriving downtown. You shouldn't be able to cut through Whyte Avenue on your way to work and have it be the most, economical and efficient way to get to work. Like, it's crazy. I don't know why we think like this. So I'm looking forward to that aspect changing. Edmonton growing. We are in a huge boom right now. I was just talking to some developer friends the other day doing a tour of a new property they're building. And they've just broken ground on another one right beside it. I guess they say we're relatively one of the last affordable places, larger cities in Canada to move to. I mean, obviously we have affordability issues, but in relative context to Vancouver, even Calgary and Toronto. So I see over the next 2 years a huge boom in residents to Edmonton. And so how we plan and design our city, the city is kind of perpetually unfinished. We're always shifting and changing things. But how we grow in the next 5 years, I think, is going to be extremely important, because we're going to welcome a whole lot of people to the city. And we have an opportunity to capture a whole lot of people that are getting priced out of Vancouver, Toronto, and even priced out of Calgary. And my goal is to welcome them all into Edmonton, have great places to live, great communities to walk around in, and great businesses to spend money at.
Love it.
I think one of the biggest problems with our sort of post-war cities, as Kalen was talking about, is we've always sort of had this separation between commercial districts and residential areas. And part of the zoning bylaw and all of these overhauls that Kalen's talking about is to break down that separation. So I think what we're going to start to see in cities like Edmonton for sure, because we're embracing it. Calgary, we'll see if they can wrap their heads around it. But what we're going to see in Edmonton and cities like us who are embracing this change is a total breakdown of that separation. So more small neighborhood main streets in residential areas, more office buildings being converted into residential areas, so that in our downtown, for example, you're going to see residential all the way through downtown, mixed with small business, mixed with offices, live units that are condos, co-working spaces in your neighborhood plaza in South Edmonton, like all kinds of intermingling of commercial and residential uses, because that's what makes a complete community that people want to live in.
Very cool. Kalen?
I'll bring it up 40,000 feet. Just as Edmonton's been talking about growing from 1 to 2 million, the province itself is talking about doubling from 4 to 8. And coupling with this...
Do you believe that, by the way?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. Of course
100%.
Of course I do.
No, that's a wild...
In how many years?
They're saying like in 40 years. 40 years you're going to double the population.
The country is bringing in 1 million people per year in terms of permanent and non-permanent residents and immigrants. 1 million. And those people are not moving to Brandon, Manitoba or Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. They're moving to the top 6 metros.
No offense, Moose Jaw.
And no offense to Moose Jaw. But they're moving to the top 6 metros, and we're in the top 6. So and so is Calgary. So just by virtue of who we are, if we're smart, we will gather a lot of new migrants to our cities. And what's even cooler is that I just love the fact that this provincial government announced a vision for a province-wide rail system. Yeah. I mean, this is game-changing. I'm agnostic about the technology or the speed, but the corridor between Calgary and Edmonton, with Red Deer anchoring the middle, this is the growth node for our province in terms of urban population. And if you can imagine that being seamless and quick and fast, that will, just as I started the conversation by saying cities are built on the transportation networks that run them, if our province is powered by highly connected urban places, I actually don't know what our cities are going to look like. I agree that at the more fine-grained level, they'll always be about humans and people. But the power of this idea and its potential to deliver on what our big cities in our province can provide for Canada as the welcome mat to the world is just astonishingly inspiring. So this is when I'm thinking 10 or 20 years out, like, that's what gets me going.
High-speed rail between Edmonton and Calgary would be unreal. Right?
Just don't screw it up. Don't go high tech and make
monorail.
this crazy thing. Like, just make a high speed train.
Make one that
don't
works.
screw it up. Don't try to do the most innovative thing ever. Like, a high speed working train would be transformational for both of our cities.
Like if you could get between
It would
the
be
cities
amazing.
in like 45 to
Oh my
60
God.
minutes, can you imagine?
The amount
we'd
of
be like
opportunity.
Suburbs of each
No,
other.
I would meet my parents for dinner in Calgary and then come back home. Like that would be an actual real thing.
We'd have a second studio there.
Johnny, but we actually might.
Because
Johnny out there.
we've been asked to go down there and do shows, but
All
it's
the
like, what do we
time.
do? Fly? Like,
Yeah.
drive 3 hours? So,
100%. Yeah. Do you believe that in the premier's? That's a weird way. Do you believe? But what do you make? Daniel Smith says Red Deer could be a city of 1 million.
Well, why not? I mean, we didn't even exist as cities until like 100 years ago. So we have built 1 million people in the last 100 years. Why is it ridiculous to think that we'll be doubling that in the next 40 or 50? It just isn't.
Yeah.
And so our biggest risk is underestimating and low ambition.
Yeah.
Totally.
Whiterium says high-speed rail can only work with comprehensive LRT systems in all the big cities. I do agree. There's got to be something there when you get there, right? I saw a lot of people. We did like an informal, unscientific, unofficial Twitter poll on this, and it seemed like people were kind of keen on the idea of high-speed rail. I asked, would you use it? Would you not? And a lot of people kind of said as well, I need to know what it looks like once I get there. And this kind of comes back to my question earlier, like, do you buy into the idea of like car cities? But people basically say like, if you're going to like, say for example, travel into Calgary for the weekend, but then you're going to need your car to get around everywhere, they may not use rail to get there. You know what I mean?
People don't even buy cars anymore, young people. They're using Ubers.
I keep hearing this.
We need to get over this idea that you get into a city and you're trapped. Nobody's trapped.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like, we don't even know what the technology 5 years from now is going to be, let alone 15 or 20. So let's just, the point of view that we need to maintain is maximize mobility options for as many people at as diverse a price point as possible, and your city will be on the move.
Love it. That's Kalen Anderson. Congratulations. It's so cool that we have you on today, the launch day for Build Edmonton Metro. I know that there's a lot that's gone into that. Kalen, the CEO at Build Edmonton Metro. Amos Kajner-Nonnekes has been hanging out with us, partner director of design with Vignettes, and of course, Puneeta McBryan, CEO of the Edmonton Downtown Business Association. Let us know what you think on this. Justin chiming in late here. He says he's been on that bullet train in Japan from Tokyo to Kyoto. Says it would be transformational to get it here. Says, but again, their entire transit system is at that same level in every city as well. I need to get my ass to Japan.
Yeah,
Everybody that goes to, I
seriously.
see
It's
photos
on
of
my
it.
list.
That is
Yeah.
like right at the top of my list. Thanks to the three of you, and to you, Real Talkers. If there's something we didn't touch on, or if you have a hot take on that, the zoning changes, that blanket rezoning down in Calgary. Obviously, we know a lot of you are tuning in from the southern Alberta city. Let us know what you think to talk at RyanJesperson.com. Maybe you've got a candidate for consideration for the flamethrower coming up on Friday's Real Talk. Your chance to blow off a little steam. This presented by our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. How cool to Johnny to have them in the studio last night after the Oilers game, the ownership group from
That
the
was-
DQs. They walk in the door, just flamethrower.
We had quite the evening last
We
night.
did have quite the
And-
evening. I mean, I'm not going to call us heroes for being here this morning, but the fact that we are on camera in this space, you want to talk about placemaking. We made this a place last night,
You are,
we
you
ever?
are lucky we're here. And Puneeta, you'll be happy to hear that the Society for Public Drunkenness and Outdoor Mobile Chairs was also in the building. We're holding a big meeting, all of us.
We had a big board meeting here last night. They were moving chairs all over the place. And I don't think any of them were stolen, although we're not 100% sure. We haven't done the inventory yet.
Public drunkenness and stolen.
Yeah, I think we want to call it. I
How
think
do
we
I
want to call
apply?
it public revelry.
We're working on the name.
Public revelry
We're
is a
working on
little.
the name.
We can sell that a little easier. But yeah, hey man, it's all about establishing and we're speaking the three of your language. We're kind of like we want to be a case study, right? Like we built this space on purpose and with intent to bring people in. We love when people loiter here. You might not get out of here before noon. Who knows? We'll wrap up this episode, but that's kind of the whole idea, and we buy into it, and we love hearing informed insight from guests like you. So thanks for giving us your time today. We're going to wrap the show now, but before we do, and as we wrap, Johnny, we can go ahead and give me that music bed, but I do want to put something on your radar really quick. If you missed Amber Bracken, award-winning photojournalist, I'm talking World Press Photo of the Year award-winning journalist, on the show yesterday talking about her photo essay in Alberta Views about this remarkable 10-year-old. I'm showing you on my screen right now, a fundraising phenom. She ran the length of the Gaza Strip in Alberta to raise money and awareness for kids. Make sure you check it out. And you can check out Amber's full feature at albertaviews.ca. We'll talk to you soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, Technical producer, John Hicks. General Manager, Katie Cook-Chivers. Account Coordinator, Lawrence Derlego. Human Resources, Lena Shepard. Website design, Mike Johnston. Voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjasperson.com.